happy Diwali from me and Mr. Octavius. Happy Diwali to each and every member and supporter of Mental Space Academy India. And I was wondering what to bring for this beautiful celebration week. And what connection can mental space and psychology have with religion and spirituality? There's much written on the aspect of psychology and spirituality and religion. Um, and interestingly enough, Dr. Lucas Dirks, who is the founder of Mental Space Psychology, in his groundbreaking book, The Social Panoramas, has an entire section, chapter 7, on spiritual panorama. Now, the spiritual panorama is how the space is organized around the notions of various spiritual concepts and notions. The chapter is a fascinating read if you have the book and if you can access the book. You're also welcome to email me or email Mental Space Academy India, and we are happy to provide you with a copy. The spiritual panoramas in that particular book describes about how we might be locating gods and goddesses and notions of spirits and those who have departed and all other aspects about our spiritual life. Now, the interesting thing is in my coaching practice also, especially I think within the South Asian context, this is a very key aspect, and one has to work with it. And because spirituality and religion, as Ian Gilchrist points out very clearly, it's a way by which there is this infinite number of possibilities that we are connecting into, and people do. Uh, I have had experiences where clients who felt very lonely in that particular phase in life, and if I asked them to have a supportive supportive image, a support panorama for them, they couldn't find any human beings. Any human being they would think of that as a problem. This is a problem. That's what is happening. And the birds and animals would also not work. In such cases, I have found that they might be having some faith practices, whether it's a god or a goddess or some energies or angels or fairies or some kind of spirits, some kind of a sense of something more than them. And they respond very well to that. Many folks who have been deep into spiritual practice, when I have examined their panorama, I have again seen that there is a strong connection of the spiritual figures in their lives. For some, I have seen that it's right in front and it's just huge. And it's not like with a form, but with a sense of an energy or presence somewhere there. Sometimes I have seen in spiritual teachers a position right above. And a very interesting piece is some folks that I have explored the panorama with speak of a touch. Touch seems to be, again, very interesting. Touch to the spine is a very interesting characteristic that I have noticed. Again, these are all useful and helpful inputs for people as they attempt to navigate and figure out their lives. And coaches and therapists would do well to kind of pay attention. I have had clients who have who have told me with a great conviction that they had Shirdi Sai Baba standing right in front. And in fact, when they were talking to me, I could see them pointing in that direction and also telling me what he would have told and, conveying that to me. It is, again, these are all very interesting aspects of human life. And it is worthwhile to go into them with a lot of curiosity and openness. I have even worked around Reiki issues around bad energies and good energies, where the client has personified their teacher and use the cultural modality, the spiritual modality they are most comfortable with, that is the Reiki energy in the Reiki practice, to work through themselves about the issues they are experiencing spatially. Uh, now, an interesting part that I want to bring is that the very notion of religion comes from Europe per se. And it emerges from a set of historical events and historical trends which required religion to be defined the way it went on to be. And therefore, when we talk about religion and the lens and the perspective with which we are looking at religion, it is appropriate for Europe and for the modern Americas. It is also true, because our world is highly globalized, that it's also true for a lot of the Indian population too, because then religion is occupying a very similar structure across the world. At the same time, it's not completely true. It is not completely true amongst the pagan religions, amongst the old forms of pagan religions in Ireland and Scotland and in those spaces. And it is definitely not true with the Native Americans, the spiritual practices of the Native Americans. And it is most definitely not true where, as far as the South Asian spiritual practice is concerned. In my PhD, when I was working on my PhD back in the early 2000s, I noticed that it was very difficult to use the usual definition of religion to describe what is called quote unquote Hindu religion. Because there isn't a single coherent methods of ways in which people cohere and gather. There's no single gods or a single book or a single set of fundamentals. It's just shifting and changing in the multiple philosophical mode, and it's all acceptable. And one cannot say this is so and that is it. The best one can say is that it's a chain of memory, and to which I would say a chain of memory that is connected to the land. And this is very important. Uh, Instead of religion being a separate part, like religion, then this is work, and this is my family life, and this is my friends, and this kind of clear categorization is a phenomenon that has become very sharp in the last few hundred years, especially in Europe, and it's come via the colonial roots back to India. And I would say this is true not just for the South Asian religion. In my observation of Abrahamic religions, especially the Islamic culture, as I see in India, the same thing also applies, because there's the notion of the land and the vegetation, the plants and the animals and the beings, they all exist together. So the sense of hierarchy that is often there, that has become more and more prominent, not only in Europe but also in South Asia over the centuries, is there and not there. So we have come to have a hierarchy of the greater gods, or the more mainstream gods, and the upper class gods, upper caste gods, and the other gods and goddesses. But then there is also these other underlying traditions which comes with the Vedas and the Upanishads, which are not they're not so fragmented. They combined the music of a place with the sound and the space and the with the concepts and the practice. Therefore, the festival is not merely the festival of Lakshmi or Ganesha, but it is the festival of our land. An interesting piece that I can bring is, for example, people venerate Kashi. Kashi is not the legal name of a town necessarily, but it is the land by the banks of the Ganges in a particular area, right? And people have a sense of what is that area by the banks of the Ganges. That is more sacred than, say, Kashi Vishwanath's temple, which may be located in it, or Shiva, who's located within the Vishwanath temple. Similarly, Allahabad is important. Allahabad as literally the banks of the Ganges in that Allahabad region, where it said that the three rivers merge together, the Sangam area. That is important. The Sangam area is important. Not so much the town, even the name of the town, and definitely no gods or goddesses necessarily are as important as literally the soil, the land that is in relationship with the river, which in itself has a marker of the multiple rivers kind of combining. This makes for a very interesting understanding um, of the spiritual panorama, wherein to a great extent, mental space panoramas tend to be. I'm looking at the personification and where they're located, and understanding my and relationship based on where they are located and the distance and the submodalities. But the space per se is not responsive, right? The space doesn't talk, the space isn't imbued. However, when you come to the sacred spaces, the space itself is highly imbued and it's potent, psychoactive, and it is in a sacred relationship. I mean, mm, for lack of any other word, it's in a very active relationship with the person who believes in them, who has those faith practices around the sacred space. I want to read a small piece from this beautiful book, The Spell of the Sensuous by David Abram, in which he speaks about time, space, and the eclipse of Earth. And he says different gods dwell in different places and different demons. And he's speaking in context of Ireland. Each place has its own dynamism, its own patterns of movement, and these patterns engage the senses and relate them in particular ways, instilling particular moods and modes of awareness, so that the unlettered oral people will rightly say that each place has its own mind, its own personality, and its own intelligence. It's a very important piece where we are not considering the space, the place itself, to be dead, but then an alive, active entity in relationship with the human. There is this other very beautiful book by Nalini Ramchandran, which is Gods, Giants, and Geography of India. And she is doing an Indian mythological exploration. Our myths are not merely myths. It's not just about conceptual, it's not just a cognitive stuff, but it has a material reality, that there is actual geography connected to each of these mythological stories. And where the very first section of her book is where the gods live, and where she goes exploring the different locations in India, in South Asia per se, where which is connected to the different mythological movements, and it is connected with geological movements and geological shifts and changes. Uh, and in that context, I think it's very important when we are looking at the personification of any god or goddess, that it's not merely abstracted from the land and the space that they belong to. For example, if I'm very close to Kali, and of course Diwali is the night of Kali. But then if I said Kali, then the English language and also the language per se as it has come to be tends to be abstracted from all of its context, and it just becomes Kali. But it's not Kali. For me, there are multiple kinds of Kali. One is Kaligat Kali, that is perhaps evokes a particular kind of energies and state for me. And as you can see, she's very much on the right, and in fact, very close on the right. And that particular Kali is not separate from the temple and that land by the Hooghly where she exists. It's she's in the formation of a rock, and it is or a stone, and it's imbued. The form and the land are not separate. Similarly, if I were to talk about Dakshineshwar Kali has a very different aura. I have a very different kind of feeling for Dakshineshwar Kali. Again, because the land, my connections, the stories that has come through it is very different from, say, the Kaligat Kali. It's very different from the Kali, a temple that used to be, when I was growing up in the terrace of my building. My landlord used to pray to Kali a lot, and he had a little temple built right at the top of the building. And on Kali Puja, of course, he would have this elaborate worship. And I was in a relationship with that Kali, and that Kali and that temple, that Kali is not separate from that temple, would come to me with a different kind of a potency. People talk about Sai Baba, and then it's not just Sai Baba, it's Shirdi Sai Baba. Shirdi Sai Baba comes with the potency of Shirdi. Sometimes people don't even need to go inside the temple. Just the Shirdi, the space itself has, that is a connection that comes to people. So when you talk about Sai Baba, you can simply even talk just about Shirdi. It's different from Satya Sai Baba. And Satya Sai Baba has his own land and his own kind of a way in which there is an interaction, which different people will have different ways. So, my sense is when we are talking about spiritual panorama and we are exploring this issue, that uh, at least for the older cultures, the older religions, and those who are able to practice in those old traditional ways, the land, the place is a very important part of noticing, of working through whatever is going on. For example, the Makkah, many people in the Islamic culture are praying in the direction of Makkah. So the place is all very intensely a part of the experience of the practice in this moment. And one perhaps could also pay attention to these place based information and what it does. For me, when I have noticed, and I have yet to explore with others, is that the notion of sensing the place again is massive. It brings in various states, and it also brings in different energies within me, and it's massively grounding. I think it reconnects back to a certain sense of an ecology, which is sometimes not present if you just worked with personification. Again, these are all just explorations, and uh, it would be wonderful if you explored and you had something to relate back. For now, once again, I hope this Diwali week is continuing. I wish you all a wonderful, wonderful Diwali. Sana will join next week or the week after. We hope to bring in a few other coaches to have more interesting conversations in different directions. I wish you and your family a wonderful sacred gathering, and memories that you can connect to the spaces where you have gathered and celebrated. Thank you.